you can hear us. Hold on. Hey guys. So I just unmuted us. Hopefully you can hear us. So this is a different live stream that we had before we had our guest here. Now we don't. And this is going to be a little bit different because we're going to be talking about the video that you just saw today, this morning at 11, I think it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if there's any comments or anything that you want to ask us about, we're going to talk about that. And then my father has a couple other things that we're going to also be talking about.
I thought it was a good video this morning. I thought it was kind of interesting.
It was a good video.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
A little bit less intense than the previous video in terms of the amount of technology that we covered, but I think it's remarkable. We've actually brought a few of the items in here. We're going to do a little bit of a taste test.
Yep.
What we want to start out with, though, is suggested in the thumbnail. And back last Wednesday, obviously, there was a big event that's, surrounded the world with controversy and, a lot of news media are covering it. And we've been following this, very, very closely. And the reason that I wanted to start out with sort of a rule or rules of the game is that this channel has made a very concerted effort to remain independent of any kind of political discussions, political issues. And there's a number of reasons why we do this. Number one, don't know if you know this, but about half of the audience for this channel is international. About half of it's in the U.S. and half of it's around the globe. And so trying to discuss any kind of a political issue is going to be very difficult because you're going to be covering dozens of different types of political events around the world. It would completely distract from the main premise for why we started this channel. The second reason was that Alex and I are avid consumers of YouTube. We watch all kinds of channels. We watch all kinds of YouTubers presenting all areas of expertise and things that they're interested in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
but
I do.
In the area of politics, we're no more experienced or knowledgeable than any of you out there. And to use the platform as sort of an opportunity to present our particular political positions and feelings we have about, current events, just seems like it would distract from the main purpose for the channel. And thirdly, if you are interested in politics, if you want to get into the political arena, there are a lot of good channels out there that cover all aspects and all different perspectives, and they do a good job. And at some point, you can get sort of inundated with that, and you want to say, okay, enough of this. I wonder what Tech Ingredients is doing. And you know that you can come here and you're going to get science, engineering, and technology, and it's a bit of a break from those other types of worldly events. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to join us in staying away from any kind of political controversy here, because what we're going to be discussing is the science, engineering, and technology related to security. It doesn't matter who's being secured. It doesn't matter what the particular specific events are that we're going to be talking about. What really matters is how do we keep people safe? At the end of every video, I always say, stay safe, have fun, and we'll see you soon. Safety is important, and what we're going to try to investigate is if the event that occurred on Wednesday and a very similar event back in Butler about a year ago could be prevented by the application of appropriate technology. And I am convinced it could have been. And so over the last couple of days, I've been up a lot, and I've been on the phone with a number of security companies and security technology firms, and I've learned a lot. And to start, before I get into this sort of high-level technology applications, some observations that I think are kind of important to set the stage. When you look at the event in Butler about a year ago and this event here in Utah, there are a remarkable number of similarities in these two events, and I want to point these out because I think they're critical. One is you have relatively famous or very famous people that are doing live speaking engagements on the road. They're not at their home base, they're out in the field. And typically, you would expect that these groups, both the presidential candidate as well as Mr. Kirk, have large organizations behind them. Turning Point has a budget of about $200 million a year, and obviously, if you've got a billionaire with a Secret Service backing them up, security, financing for security, and the availability of technology and manpower should not have been sort of the key limitation here. That's not the weakness. Imagine if you were part of a team that was going to be organizing a speaker that is going to be traveling around the country and giving multiple speaking engagements. The organizers would probably look at the route and say, all right, where are we going to set up? Do we have a venue that would provide sufficient availability for the size crowds we want? Are there going to be good means of transportation, both for the speaker as well as for the audience? Is there food available? Is there bathroom facilities? The just basic infrastructure to make it a possibility. Then they're going to see, is the venue available on the date that would make it convenient for them to move from one location to another. You would imagine that once they've targeted an area that they think is going to be a likely location, their security team would be involved in this process. It's hard to imagine that they wouldn't, and that they would evaluate the site, look for security issues. Are they overwhelming and they should simply say, this is not some place we're going to go? Or is it something that could be mitigated, and so we have to do a little bit more deep dive? If it turns out that it's a big enough venue and it's going to be a big enough event, they may send out a lead team to, on the ground, evaluate what the risks are and how they're going to deal with them, or contract with a local trusted security company that could do the on-site evaluation for them. Then they put that all together and they say to the organizers, yeah, this is legitimate, we can go ahead, we can make this area safe. Then they announce that they're going to be there on a certain day. And at that point, the public is now aware that there's going to be a particular person at a particular location at a particular time. Now, when the security is going to be performed, obviously they've got to have certain concerns that they're going to be looking at, and I would suspect, I'm not a security expert, but in talking to a number of them, the lead or the most risky situation is coming from the audience. You've got thousands of people, you can't strip search them, they're going to be moving around, and you've got a limited number of people available to do the monitoring and the just the maintenance of safety. But obviously, in both of these cases, we had relatively similar attacks, and they were outside of that particular area of risk. In both Butler and in Utah, you had what appears to be a lone individual who was able to get to an access point in order to be able to target the victim. And this individual would have only learned about the event and where they needed to go and how they would do this at the time it was made public. So they had even less time to work in order to find out where they were going to be beginning the attack. And in addition to that, you've got to remember that the security...
Can I interrupt for a second? Because someone who just mentioned drones that you're going to get into.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to get into the technology. This will only be a couple more minutes, but I want to set this up, and then we'll move into the tech field. But I think this is important.
Yeah, but it's not all theoretical.
No.
It's like he has some ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. I like that. That's going to be good.
Yeah.
Now, that person who's scoping out the place to figure out if they can perform the attack is also going to have to do it kind of carefully, because if there's some sketchy character moving around the facility several days in advance of this event, they're going to set off some red flags and potentially interfere with their ability to accomplish this. Nevertheless, they were able to accomplish this. They were able to get up on a roof at a moderate distance, an elevated position, in order to be able to perform the attack. And what occurred to me when I was watching a lot of the YouTube streams and some of the news media was that everybody seems to be focusing on the forensic aspect of this. The millions of dollars and the hundreds, maybe even thousands of individuals that were involved in trying to capture the person after the fact. When in fact, I believe it would be possible to interfere or make this type of attack nearly impossible by using the same sort of level of technology. And so I came up with what I thought was a clever idea. I thought, well, if somebody is going to take a device and send, a projectile in my direction, they're going to have a clean line of sight. And the individual who's under attack is going to, at least for a brief period of time, by definition, have a clean line of sight to the attacker. It goes both ways. So I thought, what if you just put a sort of quiet, little potted plant that had a smart camera very near the individual who is going to be threatened, and you were using that kind of visualization to take a look at the surrounding venue. And that smart technology is widely available. It's not that expensive. And so when I presented this to a couple of the security people that I had talked to about that, they confirmed about the human threat as being the greater threat, but that would be a very effective way to be able to minimize the ability of the attacker to perform the act. And I'm speaking a little bit roundabout, again, because of the YouTube terms of service kind of situation. I can't use certain words, but I think I'm making this clear.
Yeah, and let me interrupt you for a second. Captain Stonecrab, thank you for the two, and they agree that thank you for keeping this apolitical.
Right.
Yeah, and as we should.
As I would appreciate if everybody else does too, because we can accomplish something here. I think we can discuss this, and I think we can reach some pretty good conclusions. But when I talked to one individual who's with a very large security system, security company that does a lot of the sort of development of equipment and systems and engineering and software and personnel to be able to do the kind of monitoring that you would want to do, they said, yeah, your idea it's clever, but it's insufficient. What you would need to do is you would locate smart camera systems. And for the particular event, the individual I talked to was familiar with the venue as well as not only the technology, but the event that occurred. So they were familiar with, the limitations, and said that typically you would use multiple cameras, something close to 5 cameras, 2 placed facing the target. In other words, facing the venue from behind the audience. And 2 cameras would be located on either side of the audience, and then 1 camera exactly where I said, as close as you could to the target. The advantages with this is you remove dead zones. You don't have any area where you can't get visualization, and by correlating the images from multiple cameras, you can triangulate, and you can then follow a moving person or moving individual of interest throughout the entire venue in order to be able to see what their actions are, where they're going, what they're doing. In addition, there were a lot of very sophisticated things that these camera systems can do. And the advice was that if you had located the scene where you were going to be setting up for the event, you would scope it out 3 days in advance, making sure that there's nobody sort of hiding the bushes or equipment that's around there that shouldn't be around there. And then you would begin the video monitoring. What was clear from more than one person was that the kind of technology that was being used for this type of video surveillance was what was already present at the school, at the site, permanently mounted CCTV camera systems that are located in stairwells and overviewing large fields, but do not provide the kind of resolution, frame rate, and any of the software that would be necessary to truly survey this with computer vision. It was 15-year-old technology. And we can probably be pretty confident that he's correct, because when you look at a lot of the forensic information post-event, The imaging is lousy. It's really awful. And even with the improvements with AI modification and image enhancements, still not anything like the kind of image quality that you need. And so what was kind of interesting about that is that you begin the surveillance ahead of time so that there's no way for anybody to get in, and you would do it with a mobile system. These systems, like those towers that you brought up.
Oh, well, they're not brought up quite yet.
I thought you were.
Now
okay.
they're up.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
These types of camera systems that include, and we'll get into the type of technology, can be mounted on semi-portable systems, tower systems. You've probably seen these at construction sites where you take a cart, you move it in, you crank a little cable, and you lift a tower up to put metal halide lighting on a construction site. Or sometimes parking lots at football games, you can bring in these carts that have their own power. They are secure. You can't break into them. And they can elevate the camera to a desirable height, as much as 10 meters above the ground, in order to get a view down without having to fly anything like a drone. And those things would provide point-to-point communications, radio communications with a central server that could do the analysis of the image in order to be able to determine, if certain figures or objects represent a threat that then involve human intervention. And in no case are we talking about anything offensive here. This is completely defensive security monitoring that would then lead to the next level, which is human intervention and investigation. By leaving them there several days in advance, you make it very, very difficult for anybody to approach or hide, get in a sleeping bag underneath a bush, and remain in the area prior to the crowds beginning to arrive.
Just to interrupt, do you want me to pull up any of these images yet?
You could leave that right now, just because I think it's good
well,
background.
no one sees this.
Okay, yeah,
right
bring
now.
that up.
So this one or
that one.
this one?
Say that one. That one's a good one because it actually shows where that individual was supposedly present. Okay. And when you can imagine that the camera systems that have the lousy pictures of this individual show somebody a lump on the roof, it would be almost impossible for a smart camera system to miss this. You would have seen it easily, but they didn't do this. And because these systems are mobile and could be brought along with the team, the security team, they could be set up either ahead of time, they could be set up a couple of hours ahead of time, enhanced a couple of hours ahead of time. They wouldn't then depend on the idiosyncratic security systems present already at the venue. And the people that use the software would be familiar with it, and that kind of a system could be installed for the particular event. When I talked to the individual who represented the company that does this, builds these kinds of systems, and I mean exactly what I'm describing, I said, is this something that would require engineers to get together and brainstorm in order to build something for this kind of application? And he said, no, this is off the shelf. You could, if you just had a checkbook, you could basically write for this, and we have the equipment. It's already in existence. This isn't theoretical. It's not sci-fi. This exists. And I said, how much would it cost? And this was, hours into this conversation. They said pretty much the intelligent part of the hardware, which is the cameras, the software, the interconnects, all of that sort of thing, about $100,000. Maybe a little more, a little less, depending on the features you want, but let's say $100,000. I talked to a couple of these tower companies, and in order to be able to put up, say, 4 remote camera systems that you could use to sort of mount these and provide the electric power for these, you would need about $50,000 to do that. That's an upfront cost of $150,000. I asked the individual, you sound pretty competent in this field and looks like you've been doing this for a while. Would it involve more than, say, one individual who was a specialist in this area to get everything up and running and then do the monitoring? And he said, no, one person could do this. You could even, with enough training, train some of your security guards as dual purpose. But even if we assumed you had a dedicated IT person who could have a little bit of engineering background, a little bit of programming background, I checked with Lars, who does this sort of thing for a living in terms of, hiring and, management systems organization. And he came up with a cost, a yearly salary of probably around $90,000. And when you consider even the benefits, insurance, and all the rest of it, we're talking about 130 grand. And about 20 grand of maintenance cost if you figure that the system would last about 7 years. So we're talking about an upfront cost of about 150 grand, and we're talking about a yearly investment or cost of about another 150 grand. Would allow you to put a system up there that could not only monitor down to the sort of almost millimeter scale resolution, but include software that can analyze the situation either with edge application, which we'll get into, or with central core operation. And these things talk to each other, and they talk to each other with smart protocols so that cameras that have, say, they're no longer able to see an object can tell another camera to focus in on that object. There are a lot more details I can get into, but I think I'm sort of giving you where I want to go with this. It's like, can we get something like this going? And moving into the future, no matter what political aspect you're talking about, whether it's a rock concert, whether it's a political figure, anybody who is in a similar kind of threat situation, we could potentially eliminate that one route of attack today with a relatively small budget.
Yeah. Okay. And then a comment here.
Okay.
Okay. So Zane, thank you very much for the 5. Zane, thank you very much for the 5. I bet you could have seen that shot off go in the video, and then figured out where to search for the shooter, or triangulated the shots positions, perhaps.
I agree with you 100%, but I don't want to focus on the forensics. I don't want to look at after the fact. Police, they say, isn't that the statement like police are not there to prevent a crime, they're there to arrest the criminal?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's totally true. You see, a cop walking down the street, you generally, think that they're going to intervene. But the point is, let's apply that to finding the person before they trigger the device. Right. And so the whole concept is that if you have some of the software that was described to me, you can analyze so many sophisticated aspects of the potential threats that it would be almost impossible for anybody to be anywhere they're not supposed to be. And you can have levels of, investigation. Is that a leaf or is that a human being? You can incorporate thermal imaging capabilities that operate in the long wave infrared range, 8 to 14 microns or so, where human bodies glow. But the roof might be a little cooler, or the trees are going to be far cooler. You could find somebody who's hidden under camouflage. You could find somebody who is hiding behind a bush. Thermal imaging is a possibility. When I brought up drones, I said, yeah, it's another platform, but it's the technology itself that's important, not the mast lift or the drone, not the location. It's mostly the software that can communicate and provide that interface to the human operator, give them the filtered image, the moderator, so to speak, of the imaging. And the AI, which is often over-marketed, is beginning to move into this field where they can look not only at, say, objects that move or shouldn't be there, but they can look at behaviors. They can look at somebody who's in the audience who's been standing still for 10 minutes and all of a sudden becomes agitated. They can coordinate the agitation between different people that are all coordinated in time. Why should everybody be getting nervous at a certain time? They can focus on that. They can identify that, and they can track specifically those people. One example was given to me. If you wanted to look for somebody in a black shirt with a black backpack, it can identify everybody in the audience, and it can track actively all 28 of them and be able to follow their moves after the fact, and because they've got the information pre the fact. So you could look both back in time and into the future on all of those individuals. If you had a license plate that somebody said, I think it had an O or a Q or something, it can identify all the cars in the parking lot with the letter Q or something that's close to a Q. Even if it's not the first letter, last letter, it'll identify and track continuously those targets. So it would make it extremely difficult for anybody who's got an organized plan to be able to perform it. It would just make the threshold so high, they're not going to be able to do it. And because of the cost, as I described, these are very expensive security teams. We're talking about a very small additional cost. And clearly they did not do this. And so the fact that it is on, it's on the off the shelf kind of stuff, and in 3 days talking to these people, I think I know how to do it. So I'm kind of surprised that this hasn't already been incorporated. And the fact that the forensic images after the fact show that they didn't have that kind of videography being performed. They would have provided those images if it would have helped to locate the individual. They're relying on cell phones and doorbell cams and all of this sort of thing. They're not doing it, and they should have been doing it, and they could have been doing it. And I think that needs to be immediately something that is considered by security teams that have this kind of responsibility for high-profile individuals when they're in these forums, in these sort of open-air, vulnerable forums.
And I would say, like, out of all these like methods, I think drones would be the easiest and best method, because of the fact that you can have people that aren't even there with you. You can be, far away, and would be able to surveil the site and be able to see, is there someone that looks like they shouldn't be there?
Right.
It's a very like simple thing to do.
And all you have to do is elevate your level of concern to the point where it's like, this seems a little funky. Now, if you don't have enough information, you can then elevate it and say, okay, let's send somebody out to take a look at this.
No, well, I agree. But even if it wasn't funky, it's like you still have the footage. So you're recording something that even if you didn't think it looked funky, there's something there that you might be able to see something of a person running off of a roof or whatever.
Also, if the drones are there, people know they're there. If this becomes sort of the standard of protection,
well, actually, I think
who'd want to do this?
No, I think it'd be better for them to not know that they're there, because if
you want to catch them, I want to prevent them.
No, I still well,
fair enough.
Well, I'll disagree in this way.
All right.
Because I don't want to try to I don't want to give them more information than they already have.
That's a good philosophy, yeah.
So allow them to do what they would normally do, but now it doesn't matter whether left wing or right wing. It doesn't matter.
Well, but the attacker, you don't want them to have more information.
More information.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why I think having a drone that whoever it is doesn't know about, and they can just see you, and then you have, information afterwards.
It can't hurt.
Yeah.
Can't hurt.
I don't think
And we're
so.
already talking about like fairly sophisticated systems. So integrating into that system another camera from another location is not a big deal.
Yeah.
And I was pretty impressed with the types of cameras, the kind of systems they use. A lot of people have, doorbell cameras, and you have cameras located. We have cameras all over here. But one of the arguments is that when you're trying to get enough detail to be able to make, accurate determinations, the two philosophies are whether or not you have just enormous panoramic cameras, huge numbers of pixels, like 20, 30,000 by like 12 or 20,000. What you do in that case is you stitch together modest-sized cameras that have overlap, and the computer can essentially create a single image that has, 50 or 500 million pixels and gives you super high-resolution detail. As you can imagine, though, the bandwidth, the amount of information that has to be sent through is enormous. And one of the solutions to that is to use what they call edge cameras. I guess in the industry, this represents cameras that have a limited amount of local computing power that allows them to eliminate what is clearly not useful information, a flagpole that hasn't moved for 3 days and nothing's around it. It's a fixed object. There's no reason to keep sending pixels saying it's still the same flagpole. So it can be programmed to be selective to certain kinds of activities, and then you could reduce the bandwidth maybe 10 or 20-fold. That is the argument, as opposed to the dumber, cheaper cameras that you then require much more bandwidth at the local server that's doing all of the sophisticated software analysis. And there's a third sort of approach, which is kind of interesting, but probably not a good one. It's a much cheaper approach, where you take a very, very large field of view with relatively low resolution, looking for very small signals and signs that, there's a little blob. Can't see what it is, but it moved. It's brighter than it was before. A point of interest. Then a PZT camera, which is a point zoom, point zoom track. Yeah, point zoom track, where basically it's a secondary camera with a variable focal length and variable focus lens that has a high frame rate and high resolution that is then sent and directed to the area of interest to allow you to get the kind of data you want from that area of interest. You get much higher resolution, and it limits the amount of investment. The downside is that you have a moving camera, so there is the possibility of mechanical failure. The big limitation with that type of approach, this layered approach, is that if you have multiple targets, multiple areas of interest, there's only so much that one camera, or maybe two or three cameras, can focus in on at the same time. So you could be overwhelmed, but it would be a lower cost solution with a lower data throughput. And so it might be something that is a choice if you can't afford the budget that's necessary for the huge panoramic approach. But obviously there are going to be compromises, as there are in any kind of field. The situation with the drones, one of the things that you've got to allow for is the fact that a drone has a limited flight time. So you would want continuous observation, and probably from more than maybe one drone. And so you would have to have a team, or you'd have to have some ability to sort of send a drone up for an hour, its battery's getting low. You need to put the next drone up and then take the first drone down, change its battery before you send it up. So you'd have to have a larger number of drones than you're flying, but not a huge number. Failures, battery replacement, that sort of thing. But again, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, so another 10 or 20 for the drones, I don't think is a bad solution. And it may be that you have different types of cameras from the drones, say only thermal cameras. One of the problems that you face with any of these sorts of situations is the mobility. You're going to have to move around potentially as much as a ton of equipment from site to site. You're probably going to need a dedicated vehicle. Another problem you may have is that you can't be moving around from site to site. You've got 3 venues you're going to be speaking at in that day. There's no way to get there 3 days in advance unless you've got multiple setups with multiple technicians to be able to do this kind of analysis. Nevertheless, again, I think that there are ways that you could select your venues based on the availability of this modality for protecting them. And so it might be that you could work them into the system if it's not just layered on. You say, okay, now we're going to add this. We're going to have to work with it in order to make it possible to provide this safety. I'm kind of surprised that if you go on the media, you go on news channels and podcasts, everybody seems to be talking about, obviously, the political aspects of this and, where they stand politically. And some of them are talking about the law enforcement aspects of, how do you figure out what you're doing. But don't you find it kind of surprising that there hasn't been a lot of how are we going to prevent this? How are we going to stop this? What could we have done? What should we do? And I find that kind of surprising because it's sort of the first thing that I thought of is if something goes wrong, you look at not letting it go wrong again. And so I hope that maybe if, solutions like this are possible, that people with a little bit more knowledge, skill, and obviously the financing do investigate this like I did, because I think you're going to find that this sort of technology is going to be present in the future. You can't have attacks like this happening once a year without a level of, awareness growing to the point that this has to be done.
Yeah, no, G Money thanks for the two. Tech can be hacked for evil. Bulletproof glass question mark.
Okay.
That kind of makes sense because it is easier and more simplistic to just protect yourself with something that won't be able to get through.
Yeah, I agree.
So why wouldn't you just apply that to anybody that's speaking
Well,
publicly?
it was interesting. The guy that I was talking to, I don't know if he had a military background or what his background was,
Yeah.
but he kind of knew what was going on. And one of the things is that the hacking. I said, what if one of these individuals was actually, a surrogate for a state actor, where they've got huge budgets and could potentially hack into these systems? And he said, all these cameras are hooked up point-to-point radio communication with, it's called point-to-point encryption or point-to-point security encryption, where basically you have to talk in order to motivate the camera or direct the camera to talk to you. You sort of confirm. It's a handshake.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, but even if it wasn't that, yeah, it's hacking can still happen.
It can, and you can have failures.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, but the main question is why not then just do the physical, hardware,
like the
protection?
Pope Mobile, that sort of
Yeah,
thing, where
right,
they put
exactly.
up the glass. One
not?
thing that I would think, at least with this particular individual, is that there was sort of a interaction that tended to be sort of one-on-one. It wasn't going into the crowd, but it was this direct interaction. I can imagine if you've got this big plate glass, this projectile-proof glass, is that it would put some people off. Like if it wasn't necessary, obviously it would be desirable not to have it. It may be the only method, but it does sort of separate the speaker from the audience. It makes it seem colder. And I could see that from just a marketing point of view. It seems like it keeps reminding people of the sinisterness of, the environment. And it does remove that sort of face-to-face kind of communication. It's an excellent method. I do like, systems that don't involve software and involve operations as opposed to just a piece of glass. I understand that, but I do understand the downside. It may be it's a mixture of both.
Yeah. Actually, I would just say it's like I think it's worth it to protect, the people, whoever is talking.
Yeah.
It's like having, the lack of communication between two people because they're talking through glass, I think is better than the risk of,
if
having
this,
someone
what I'm
unalive.
describing is the high-tech approach wasn't available, I would say you have to do something.
Sure.
And I think that would be a good solution. So I don't argue against it, but I'm just sort of trying to, as the devil's advocate, say, well, why wouldn't they or why didn't they? I think that's the argument.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I don't want to be grim about this because, even though somebody was unalived, nevertheless, I don't want to be grim about the fact that can we learn anything from this? And if we can learn something from this and apply the technology to augment the security system so that it makes it harder, makes it less likely, this is a win-win in terms of the discussions about this event, as opposed to always just looking at the negative. There is upside to becoming aware of the risk rather than just blindly moving forward. And I think, like you said earlier, I think that was it. It was complacency. I don't think there was any conspiracy, deep conspiracy in either situation. Sure. I think what it was is it was such an improbable kind of event in Butler. It was such a improbable event that they just didn't bother. They didn't think this was worth checking or being aware of. That argument becomes a little bit weaker when a year later, almost in an identical kind of event occurs. I would have thought that this would have put it a little bit higher on the risk assessment list. And so I'm kind of surprised that changes weren't made for this kind of event, even just putting a couple people with binoculars around. It seems to me like you'd think you'd do that, but they didn't. Clearly, they didn't. So I think, hopefully, this is now raised high enough on the risk list that more and more people are going to be looking at this and trying to find better solutions. Because if I came up with what I did in a couple of days, I suspect there's better, smarter, more plugged-in people that could put together functional systems that incorporate a lot of this stuff with the existing security and make things just safer in the future. Remember, it's not just the target. Every person in that audience could have been the target. So you would be standing there in an audience in a future event, knowing that they're not doing anything about a guy that could be up on a screen and decides, I can't get to them because of the bulletproof glass. Let's go after somebody else just to make a point, just to, get famous or do something, angry, whatever it is. So I think we need to do something not only to protect the target, but to protect the entire venue. And this technology would do that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point.
Anybody else arguing against this? Because I would love to defend it if possible.
Well, you can look at some, but nothing that most people. And thanks, guys, for you guys are arguing against each other in the comments.
Fair enough.
It's kind of hard to, because you guys come in so often. It's kind of impossible
to prevent it. Yeah.
Well, no, to be able to argue with one person at a time.
Okay.
Would you want to move on to maybe the video this morning?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was...
well, I can then pull it up and everything.
Yeah. One of the things in that video that I actually wanted to talk a little bit about was the thing that I brought up with and again, if anybody wants to go back, we're not sort of closing that down. It's just that I don't have more prepared information.
Any questions or whatever you want to pull up, definitely do that.
One of the things that I think was actually pretty important was this issue with microplastics. I got into a bit of a discussion with Lars about this, but also I've been doing a little bit more research. And one of the things that I guess a lot of us may not appreciate is that when you take something like a piece of plastic and you wrap your food in it, you don't think of the plastic itself as being a risk. And in general, it isn't. Because plastics are often combinations of multiple chemicals. They have coatings to protect them from UV light. They have plasticizers, which change the texture so that you can stretch them and move them around. And so some of these other chemicals that are in the plastic material are very, very slightly volatile. They can enter the environment. But it's so low a volatility that it really doesn't expose you to much risk in terms of your food. The problem is that it's mechanical. It's the surface area. When you have a 1 square meter piece of polyethylene plastic stretch wrap, like we used when we were making the sake, or when you're wrapping up, a big, dinner, the surface area of that 1 meter piece of plastic is obviously 2 square meters each side. But when the plastics get ground down to a smaller size, and this can happen in, say, a washing machine if you've got, rayon or plastic in your clothes. It can happen in disposal locations like dumps, where everything is grinding against each other. The particles can go down all the way into the nanometer scale. And when you take, say, a piece of polyethylene plastic, 1 square meter, and so therefore 2 square meters when you include both sides, and you bring it down to the submicron particle size, the area skyrockets into thousands of square meters. And so that outgassing, that outflow, that evaporation and interaction with the environment increases by orders of magnitude. So something that was at a very low level from the piece of plastic becomes far, far more concentrated and more available to the environment because of its size, just because of its size. And in addition to that, once you get down to the size that can enter or pass through blood vessels, the gut, the intestinal system where you are absorbing water and nutrients, those particles can pass into the bloodstream. So you not only have plastic that you've, put on your body like this, but you literally have it flowing through your veins. And it has a surface area that can release some of these toxic chemicals into your system. Microplastics isn't BS. It actually is a potential risk to health. And so when you grind your coffee, as one commenter gave on the video I saw earlier, you grind your coffee, you're thinking about coffee beans, how abrasive they would be, and how that looks after a while. You look inside there, it's kind of frosted up. Some of that plastic got in your coffee. And when you use a blender that's plastic, or when you're using tools that have plastic, cooking utensils that have plastic, and you're scraping them around as you're using your bottle brush, or you're using your sponge to clean them, you're abrading away some of that plastic material. If it goes in the sewer, don't care so much. But if it's in your food or it's in something you're ingesting, you're going to concentrate the amount of this very small quantity in your own body. And so therefore the levels of these microplastics can go up substantially. And that's why I've become a little bit more aware of how we're exposing ourselves to this in ways that we never really even thought of before. It's not coming from industrial sources. Another source is tires. This was something that Lars brought up. Tires contain a lot of plasticizers and rubber, and as they're rolling down the road, they produce a lot of dust. And that dust gets into the air around the freeways and around roadways. And that dust can float, and it can get into the airway, and the airway through your lungs into your tissues. So there are a lot of sources of microplastics that we really have to be a little bit more aware of. And this is also going to impact what we're doing with our water purification. What are we going to do to make sure that we're not introducing more dangerous chemicals into our systems through the systems we use to purify our water to make the water safe to drink? So microplastics is probably the big takeaway from this, from a sort of, again, safety point of view. The other thing was, and we brought in some of the stuff, if any of you have tried this in the 6 hours or 7 hours since we did the live stream, I think you might be really impressed with how fragrant, how powerful this stuff is. It is a remarkable enhancement in flavor. And I think if you do try it, you will be impressed, and you probably will do this with a couple of different herbs that you routinely use, because it is a great way to extend them and make them more convenient. And it's a good excuse to get a centrifuge. So,
would you be willing to bring that out?
yeah,
now?
you want to try one of those? Let me step
because
away
I
for a
haven't.
sec.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
he's never had a chance to taste any of this.
I haven't.
Just smell it.
Well, in the previous video, I did try the tater tots with the cilantro, and okay, yeah, this will be fun. What's the herb that you used for this one?
I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, okay, I'll see if I can.
Let's see if
I'll
you can
save
figure
it.
this one out.
I almost felt like I needed to take my headphones off to be able to smell it. Have you ever? Yeah.
Well, there's a medical condition where, like, smell will. I can't remember this. Maybe somebody in the chat or is a physician, a neurologist, where you hear things and it makes you smell.
Yeah,
or
sure.
you get certain aromas and you hear things.
Well,
like it crosses in the brain.
Easy example is like when you're driving.
Yeah.
You want to turn down your music to be able to see if you're going to hit someone. Yeah.
Well, that's
It's
a
very
little
simple.
bit distraction.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, why though? Because
yeah,
it's
why?
a different.
It should be just sound, right? So, what do you want to try? Okay, that one.
I can barely. Hold on.
Oh, it's already
Okay.
faded.
No. I can't. Oh, hold on.
Uh-oh. Trust me, his hand is going to smell for about a day.
Well, we'll see. Oh. Okay.
It's a good seal.
I didn't expect that. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
right.
Ooh. I think that's oregano.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I can
yeah.
smell it here.
Yeah. That's oregano. Okay.
So let's try the oregano, because we did the cilantro.
Yeah, that's fine.
We'll try one of those.
So those are the only two that you have. Okay.
All right. You want to try one?
Sure. I'll take the one that.
Whoa.
I'll take the one that has the most. Yeah. Okay, that's pretty good.
It's really delicious. Let me try the oregano. Well, I'll take this. I'll take the same one so we don't use it. Oh,
that's
yeah.
really good.
Uh, this is remarkable. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where you think, it might work. No, you put this in your car and somebody's trying to carjack you. You spray
it in
this
their
on them,
face.
and then you just tell the police to look for a pizza. Yeah, this is really
That
good.
is really good.
I love live streams.
Yeah, like that. And the live stream. Yep. Goodbye. It's
Yeah.
like, we'll just have some pizza.
Yeah, right, exactly.
No, that is really good though. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I'm shocked by that. Okay.
Some people had commented saying it would be interesting to make a sort of combination, like you take some thyme and some, rosemary or, things that are classic combinations. I think I would advise against this because it's nice to have the pure spice, just like you do on the shelf. You probably mostly have, say, dried spices that are the pure spice, and then you have a few mixtures, a masala mix or something like that. But this way you can say, I want a little more thyme smell. I want a little bit more of the oregano. And you just add another spritz. So you can kind of fine tune it to what you want when you want it, as opposed to say, we always have to have the thyme rosemary mixture. So I don't think I would pre-mix them. They're so convenient to layer on a spritz or two. And what's also kind of nice is you can do this sort of at the table. You could just put these out just with the salt and the pepper, and you've got a couple of spray bottles. And it's really convenient to be able to use it. So
yeah, I agree.
I think it's kind of cool. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that one.
Yeah. And also the thing that I had fun in the last video.
Yeah.
When you had the
Go on.
of course. When you had the three things, tater tots, and of course you just called them potatoes.
Yeah.
But tater tots, pizza, and the pasta.
Yeah.
And the pasta was literally just pasta.
Just pasta.
Nothing else on
No
it.
butter, no oil, no nothing.
And once you spray that on there, it's like, yeah,
You're done.
You can eat
You
that.
can eat that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about low cal. Yeah.
Right, actually, that would be. I wonder how many calories that has.
Yeah, you could use Ozempic or you could use this.
Yeah,
It's even
right.
got an O on it.
Yeah, just have bread with that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not good if you're a bodybuilder, but it's a good way if you want to take a
Something, yeah.
couple of pounds off. So yeah, this was phenomenal. And it was actually
Yeah, I like that.
one of those things where I thought what came up with the idea when we were thinking about like doing the grinding is I was actually preparing the pumpkin thing that I was making.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
And-
well,
yeah.
you're not going to mention it.
I'm
though,
not
right?
gonna
Yeah,
mention the
it's gonna-
pumpkin.
It's a secret.
Yeah, it's a
for right
secret.
now. Yeah.
But I was doing another video, and I needed sort of to find out if I could modify a flavor. And I thought, I don't want any particles. I don't want any kind of, and so what do I do if I want the fresh flavor? Because whether it's fresh or it's dried, it's always still got solids in it. I wanted something that you could put in without kind of being able to see it. And so I just tried it, and what I originally used was cinnamon. I thought, okay, could I make like
Makes
a cinnamon
sense
version?
with pumpkin. Yeah.
Problem is, cinnamon has got a lot of oil components to it. So it would be a little bit less likely to be pulled out like the herbs are. But once I found like how successful it was, when I ground that, I just took a chance and I just threw, some spice because we have a bunch in our garden and everything is maturing. So I just took some, threw it in the blender, tried it out, and then the whole room, like the entire room, smelled like cilantro. It was just overwhelming, and I thought, oh, what happened? Like, did something go wrong? And the lid was still on the blender. So it was like, okay, how did this happen? And then you opened the lid, and the entire room smelled like cilantro. And I got hungry, and so then I started the experiments, and I went through a whole bunch of different spices. I did dill, oregano, thyme, rosemary, cilantro, basil. I'm trying to think. There was one other weird one that I did that actually I didn't like that much. What's the one it's sort of like oregano and basil. It's a leafy. I'll think of it in a sec.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell you, but could you be able to do that with non-leafy spices or herbs like turmeric? Would you be able to do that with that? Like,
In
how would
each,
that work?
the leafy ones, I think, are probably pretty safely. You could just use the alcohol to remove it. Once you get into the sort of seed and you get into the root, there's much higher likelihood you've got nonpolar molecule, oil-soluble molecules. You might be able to get away with sort of a vinaigrette approach, where you take some alcohol and you mix in there, say the MCT oil or a low viscosity oil, but you're always going to get the separation. So you're going to end up, even if you get all the solids out there, you're going to get an upper layer and you're going to get a lower layer, and you're going to have to do this sort of before you spray it. It's not a bad thing, but I think I could do a little bit of experiment, but like garlic would be a great example. You really need oil.
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah, that makes sense. Guys, no, not cannabis. No, that's not one of them.
Yeah, it's like
That's not for the flavor.
see, you have to kind of like sort of assume that when we're talking about stuff, there's a reason why the obvious things are not said, if you know what I mean. You know,
You think? Yeah.
you think. So it's like, yeah, if I've given you the technology, I've given you the sort of like opportunity to use this, and you could probably use it in a variety of ways that we're not going to get into here. But the one rule I would give you is safety. One of the things you got to allow for is if this is so potent here in the extraction, all I'm doing is increasing the flavor. I'm not doing anything that has any kind of like psychological effect or medical effect or anything that's sort of affecting the body other than just it tastes stronger. So if you're going to be doing something like this where you're extracting something that has a physiological effect, you might want to be kind of careful. Like, for example, I'll just give you like, say, tobacco.
Sure.
Got a lot of nicotine in it. And do you really want to concentrate that to a level that might not be good? You know, you may have cardiac issues, you may have, allergic reactions, and sort of, you want to be a little careful with that. So you're on your own if you want to start experimenting and doing that kind of stuff. But in the area of safety, I think probably I'd stay away from something unless I had a little bit of background in the effects of what you are extracting, if that makes it pretty clear.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
Safety first. Let's have fun. Let's not get hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, so I thought the previous video was a fun video. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And then not next week, but it'll probably be next week.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where there'll be something else going on. I don't want to. It's up to you to
actually,
reveal
what
it.
I think we're going to do, I think what we're going to do is, you see the table behind us. We asked for help a couple of months ago to find this, the backdrop material for our laser-based defense system. Everything is defense systems here. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a demonstration of some of the materials that we went through and how we selected the material that we're going to use. But it'll also give you the opportunity to see a multi-kilowatt laser system that is extremely powerful, and what it does to a number of materials and objects, not only the backdrop, but things that you might have thought would be safe or able to protect themselves or would be immune to that kind of energy. I haven't found anything yet that is. Unless it's a piece of glass and the light can go through it, nothing seems to hold up to it. And we're going to show you what that does to some typical objects. And so we'll set that up behind there. And I think what we'll do is we'll probably produce that video and post it 2 weeks from today. That would be our target date. So it's not going to be ready by next Saturday. And so therefore maybe saves you a week of having to look forward. I think the only reason we would do another live stream, say next Saturday, the only reason I would do that is if there have been some developments like this first thing that we talked about with the Charlie Kirk thing. I think if there's been new developments and there's something to talk about from the technology point of view, I'm willing to entertain that, because I think people have been relatively good about this. I mean, I was a little nervous about the controversial aspect of this, but I really thought it was important to get this idea out there, because something's got to be done. Sure,
and there might be something else that you might be interested in talking about, like with your centrifuge. If there's an issue with it or some change that you're going to make.
Takes you a minute to just check out the channel and see if we're around. But almost certainly 2 weeks from now, and possibly a week from now.
Yeah.
So, any other ongoing questions or?
Nothing major unless you want to look at this.
I'll take your word for it.
What about
I'll eat.
holograms? Yeah, you'll eat. Okay.
Delicious. Never eat on camera.
Okay. Let me see if I can.
Okay.
I'll see if I can find one. It's like, guys, I understand that you're like posting a bunch of comments, but when it's not a super chat and everybody's posting a comment, it's kind of hard to tie down one. Most people are agreeing.
Anybody respectfully disagree?
How is the pizza with the spray? It's good.
Let me
Obviously,
check.
yeah, we all come on, guys.
It's still wonderful.
Guys. Can't read that one. What's ever happened to the turbo shaft idea? Trying to get rid of this
Kind of on hold.
engine idea.
Yeah, kind of on hold. It's certainly something that we can do because we've got several jet engines, home built as well as commercial, that we could apply, say, a generator system to. And I think that would be kind of interesting. The only challenge with anything with these small turbos is the extremely high RPM. We're talking 100,000 RPM is low for these. Dental drill speeds. And so gearing and trying to reduce the speed is pretty tough. And so we probably would have to custom build, maybe again with Lars's help or somebody at MIT that I've talked to, that can produce a generator system that can operate directly at those speeds, very small scale, so that we don't have an interface and try to gear it down to something like an alternator or a generator, because I think that's not going to be practical. And the other advantage is it stays very light. So it sort of follows the lead of the jet engine is very light, very high performance, relatively low fuel efficiency. If you want to generate power, kind of makes sense not to go down to something that you could easily drive with a 3.5 horsepower Briggs & Stratton. So I think maybe this high-speed generator would be something. I'll give that a little bit more thought and see if anybody has some relatively practical ways of applying it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we should end it at this point.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and again, appreciate your questions and give a thought to what we initially said, is that we need to see something to improve safety. And I think if there's enough outreach and enough sort of publicity to this sort of concept of enhancing security through technology, then maybe some people who are in a position to do something about it will hear the message and maybe give a little more attention than they would have otherwise. So, hey, everybody, thanks for watching.
Oh.
Stay safe, please.
Well, okay. Now I have to interrupt. Sadly, I have to. Well, it's not sadly.
No, okay.
Thank you very much, Techno Fool, for the €5. How about blowing jet exhaust into a turbine for power extraction?
Yeah, the idea there, though, is coupling efficiency. Generally speaking, if you have a high-velocity blast coming out of there, if you want to get down to an RPM that's going to be consistent with commercial off-the-shelf generators, you're going to need to increase the size of the turbine in order to have it operate at a edge velocity consistent with the output velocity from your jet engine. This is sort of impedance matching. So as the exhaust leaves the jet engine, it's say close to Mach 1, you want the turbine that's going to be absorbing the energy and handing it over to the generator to have an edge velocity that is just a little lower than that. So you get good impedance matching of that high velocity gas into a relatively high velocity turbine blade. In order to do that, the turbine has to be relatively large in order for its output to be at a reasonable RPM and still have an edge velocity that's close to Mach 1. that becomes so bulky, you're kind of undoing the value of this lightweight, high-powered engine by putting a great big turbine on it to drive a great big generator motor at its optimal RPM. Again, you may as well just use a 3.5 horsepower Briggs & Stratton and just put a regular alternator on it. And you're going to end up kind of at the same point without going through this unnecessary technology. I think it'd be fun, be kind of interesting to see, but pretty useless. I think the real trick is the high-speed generator that could operate at the same RPM and only weighs, 50 grams or 100 grams. That then is consistent with the whole philosophy of the jet engine.
Yeah. Okay. And then just 4. Thanks for the 2, and you're welcome. And I think it was fun talking today too. So
yeah, very good. So we'll see you in a week or a couple of weeks, and we're going to have some more pizza after we sign out. So
and
thank
a couple more spritzes.
And more spritzes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Take care, guys. Appreciate it, and stay safe.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us tonight.